In order to keep bringing you guys tons of free content, we work with brand partners who you'll hear from in this episode, including an advertisement from Zopa Bank. Welcome back to the Talk 20s podcast. Before we dive into today's episode, make sure you hit that subscribe or follow button so you never miss an episode of us in the studio. Today, I'm joined in the studio by sex educator Millie Shields as we dive into dating, relationships, and sex, some of our most requested topics to chat about life in your 20s. In this episode, we're going to be talking about so many things, including what's normal and not normal in the world of dating and sex, how to create boundaries, and rebuilding your confidence after being cheated on. If you enjoy listening to this episode, it would mean the world if you could leave us a 5-star review or comment down below on YouTube. Let's crack on with the show. So hello, Millie. Welcome to the podcast. It's amazing to have you here. Thank you so much for coming into the studio.
It's lovely to be here, honestly. I'm so grateful to be on it as well. So thank you for having me.
We're going to get chatting about a lot of different topics today. A lot, absolutely. Yeah. But one of the things we should probably talk about straight up is, why do you like talking about sex education on the internet?
The amount of times I've had that question from like everyone I meet, they're just like, why do you do that?
Yeah.
I think I went through a really bad breakup about 2 years ago or just over 2 years ago. And I actually started a new job the week that I broke up with him.
Okay.
And it was all about sexual wellness, this job was. And I actually just thought there's so much that I didn't even know before I was in this relationship. There was so much I still don't know. And I'm kind of like learning on the job as well. So why don't I just like educate people as I'm going along? And there was so many people that would ask questions when I started putting that type of content out there that I was like, okay, this is definitely needed.
Mm-hmm.
Like, honestly, the most basic questions I'd get, and I'd be like, why don't we know this?
Mm-hmm.
And then when I was actually growing up, my mum used to be so formal trying to teach me about sex, and I just used to cringe and be like,
oh, been there, let's have a birds and the bees chat.
Yeah, she had this book and we used to have to sit down at the kitchen table and read through this book. And I was like, this is
really
so uncomfortable. Like, I do not want to be speaking about this with my mum.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I was like, why? Like, why is it so formal? Why is it so, that's what makes it taboo, right? So I was like, no, let's just make this like an everyday conversation. And that's exactly what TikTok is. So to do it like that, I just thought it was the best.
And when you started, like, did you ever feel uncomfortable about opening up about kind of sex online? Because it's so taboo. Like, how did you go from like sitting down and reading a book with your mum and thinking this is so awkward to actually talking quite openly and having those conversations?
I've never actually thought about that, but I think when you go through school, there's so many different things that happen, from like boys teasing you like, oh, you definitely do this to yourself. I would think like, yeah, I do. Like, what's wrong with that? And I would never understand why it was so different for us to talk about things, but it was fine for guys too, especially in school. Like, I was sent home every week for my skirt being too short or for distracting the boys, and I just never understood why it was different for us and why it wouldn't be like that for them. When it came to talking about that kind of stuff on Instagram and TikTok, because I found it so normal and I never really understood why it wasn't, the only thing I thought was odd was like the formality of my mum teaching me. But when I understood that like she was just trying to do it so I was most informed going into it, then I just had a completely different outlook on it. And I felt so comfortable from as soon as I started doing it on TikTok. And people said to my parents, I'm like, do you know the kind of content Millie's putting out? Like, are you not embarrassed? And my mum, she had no idea at the time, but she was like, no, I'm not embarrassed. Like, what's she speaking about? And then when she looked, she was like, no, it's actually good. Like, why is that embarrassing? Because we all do it. And I was like, yeah, I feel exactly the same. And there's definitely a bit of judgment around it for sure, but I don't feel awkward. People can ask me any question. I don't feel awkward talking about anything. Like, I feel like I'm literally the definition of like an open book at this point. Yeah.
So you mentioned there that like this kind of came out because of like the end of a relationship. Was that like a mutual? Was it a difficult breakup? Like, what was the situation there, if you don't mind sharing?
No, not at all. I think, so I got with him when I was about 17 and then it ended when I was 23. And
it's a long time.
It's a long time, and it's such a transitional period as well. Like you grow up so much in those years. And I think it was part of us growing apart. He did also cheat on me multiple times through the relationship. And I think I was kind of learning my worth through all of that. But I did stay with him. It's easier said than done to leave someone, especially when you are questioning your worth and what you do and what you don't want in a relationship. But yeah, the the final straw was he cheated on me again. And I was like, I actually don't need this stress in my life. Like, I struggled really bad mentally towards the end of the relationship, but I think it was because I knew my worth, but then he was telling me different. And it was like a fight between myself.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that now I try and put into like educational content, even if it's to do with boundaries or dating and those sorts of behaviours. So yeah.
A lot of the content that I've seen you talk about actually is that rebuilding yourself after someone cheats on you and kind of knowing your worth. How have you overcome that in your life? Because I think that is a huge topic. So many of us go through it. I've been through it myself when I was in my teens as well. It's a huge confidence knock.
Yeah, it is.
How do you go about rebuilding yourself and your self-confidence and feeling confident to go out and date again after something as traumatic as being cheated on?
I think, I don't know what happened to me when I had that breakup. Like, I genuinely don't know what happened, but as soon as I sort of left, it was like a relief. And I genuinely felt like a new person. Like, my confidence was like unmatched. Like, even now I look back on when I was single and I was like, whoa, like, you were probably a bit too confident, if anything. But I just thought, like, someone's made me question that for years, when like I'm in my prime, and I try and take advice from so many people who are older than me that have been through similar situations, and they always just say, like, how can anyone else question you when you're genuinely in your prime? You're like early 20s, you probably look the best you're ever gonna look. Like, you should feel the best, you know, healthy, like being healthy than you're ever gonna feel again. Like, how can someone else question that? And it made me think. And I think hearing advice from people who have been cheated on and how to sort of get over it. But I just think it's all about boundaries and really thinking about what you want. And sort of, people say like in your 20s you have to be selfish. And I think to be selfish in terms of like dating, relationships, boundaries is what you need to do to sort of question everything you do and be like, why am I doing it like that? And just having the self-awareness. And I think when you realize that you can be that self-aware, it kind of like subconsciously builds your confidence again without you even noticing. But doing things that you love and for you, not doing them for anyone else. And I think that definitely helped me.
Yeah, I was like, in my very, very like, one of my long-term relationships that I had, I've been in a long-term relationship now for like 9-10 years, but I had like another like more serious relationship. I've only really ever had one other. And I was cheated on very, very publicly in that relationship. So much so that it was like a friend that was in the friendship group.
Wow.
And like it was in sixth form. So it was like the whole sixth form knew like the next day because it happened like at a party. And like they went to have a relationship, like fair play. Like they were like wanting to like you be in a relationship, like no problems there. But I think it was just like the public humiliation and the shame. Because I think when something like that happens, especially if that partner has been in your life for such a long period of time, they know your family, they know your friends, and then like that happens so publicly. Although it is totally on him that this had happened, like it was his poor decision, I felt so much shame inside, like I'm not worthy, like, you know, someone else is better than me, like
everyone's
I'm
gonna
not
look
wanted,
at me
everyone's going to look at me. And like,
yeah.
it honestly felt like I walked into the sixth form centre and like all these lights like we've got in the studio right now. Maybe that's why I do this right now, because I'm so used to like the light was literally being on me, and it was like, wow, public shame, embarrassment. Like back in the olden days when they'd literally like throw stones at the person, it literally, it felt like that. And I don't know how I managed to get through that, because at that time it was really, really horrible.
It's
and I
the
think
worst feeling. Like,
literally,
it's horrid.
Literally. And I don't know how I picked my pieces up and kind of rebuilt, because I still had to go to school every day, still had to see them. And like, obviously now I don't, like completely, I've never even bumped into them. But like that felt like such a horrible thing to go through. But so many people go through it in their 20s.
So many people, like even when I've spoken on TikTok about how I found out that I was cheated on and how that all came about, people are like, oh my God, I've been through this. And even until I was out of the relationship, I never spoke about it. But he cheated on me quite a few times in that relationship. And I never actually spoke about any of it to family, to friends, until I was out of it, because I was embarrassed. And I felt like...
So in a way you were protecting him from like that,
And you do feel like a type of shame, like blame yourself sometimes as well. But I remember actually over COVID, the the first girl that he cheated on me with, I consistently compared myself to her. And I remember just sitting there and just crying to him. It's just like a random day. I don't even know why it was on my mind, but it is when you've been cheated on, it's always on your mind.
Yeah.
And he was just like, where has this come from? But I was like hysterical. And I think that was probably a bit of a turning point as well, because I was like, this happened about 2 years ago and I'm still going over it like this in my head, and it's still like a massive issue. So yeah, you can't let, if something affecting you that much, you can't do it. You can't do it to yourself.
So for you, I don't know if you feel this way, but like when I then got into my now very serious relationship, and obviously I'm getting married next year, like very, very exciting.
Congrats.
But like the way I approach my relationship now is so different. Yeah. Like, and I've taken like, or I don't know, like we always talk about, you know, you learn from your failures and stuff like that, but all the things that I did wrong in that original relationship and all the warning signs, I was like, this is not going well. Yeah. Like I have like been able to kind of put together a relationship that like is really positive. And I think that when you go through those times, like if I were to go through it again, or if like my daughter were to go through like a being cheated on, or probably, I would genuinely say like, this will prepare you for what then feels right in a relationship. Yeah. Because then when you're in the right relationship, you'll be like, this doesn't feel hard. This doesn't feel difficult. I'm not being cheated. I feel worthy, and all of those kind of things. And you can call out the bullshit way earlier, I think, if you have to see the positives in these horrible experiences. A quick ad break from Zopa Bank. See if you could cut your monthly cost by connecting your accounts using the Zopa Bank app. Simply head to the For You page in the app, link your accounts, and get personalised insights and tips to see if you could save on your bills or subscriptions. Just search Zopa, that's ZOPA, in your chosen app store.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think when I came out of that relationship, I looked back at stuff that maybe I had not done the best as well. And you sort of realise how you can react better to things, or how you can improve for your partner when it's healthy. And I think that changed a lot when I was dating and things as well. Like I went into things with just a completely different perspective, completely different mindset. And I was like, I felt so bad coming out of that relationship, and like we lived together, so like moving out, it was just awful, and it was really sad. But when I was dating, I was like, this actually feels good though, because now I know where I've gone wrong. I can notice other things, and it just helps me going forward.
Absolutely. So one of the things that I think is massive in finding the right relationship is communication.
Massively.
It's huge.
Oh, it's honestly just because it's so difficult for some people to communicate, and I still find it wild that it is that difficult. And for some people, it's actually easier to manipulate a situation. It's easier to gaslight than just to be honest. Yeah. And I just find that crazy, because I'm so black and white. I'm very to the point. So when someone isn't like that with me, I'm like, how is that so difficult? Yeah. And communication is literally the base of everything. Friendships, family, romantic relationships, like non-monogamous relationships, everything like that. That is just the base of it. And I think you're never taught that as well. Like we talk about all this stuff, you're not taught about sex, but you're never taught communication, honesty, like transparency. They're really core things in a relationship that you need.
And absolutely. And I think even when it's not even like a serious relationship, even if it's just like a one night thing, like still communication, like it pays to be a good communicator.
It really does.
In all scenarios. You could save yourself a lot of trouble, even on like in one night stands and dating and stuff like that, even if you're just a good communicator, because there's no second guessing then. Like
there isn't. You know. And this is always the advice I'd give. Like when I was single and I had like casual situations, and that's all I wanted, because I knew for myself I wasn't ready for a relationship. And I'd tell my friends things that had gone on, and they'd be like, oh, you can't say that. And I'd be like, why? Like that's what it is. Like if it's casual, I don't want to text all the time, because I'll probably develop feelings. I don't want them to sleep over. I don't want any of that, because that's for me when I start to develop feelings, and I don't want to for this person. And like I don't see myself with them, and I don't want to get carried away in like potential or anything like that. I just want it to be purely what it is, what we've always agreed for it to be. And they'd be like, oh, like, can you say that? But like as women as well, you're always taught to please someone and sort of do what they want to do. But to be, it might seem blunt, but so be it. Like that's what I want. And if you don't, then let's not do this. And if
How
you do,
do you communicate
let's do
that
this.
then?
That you want a casual situation.
Yeah.
I think I just state from the off, like, what do you want? And if they're like, oh, I'll see where it goes, which I think is a bit of a shit response, if I'm going to be totally honest. Like, you're lying. You're not seeing where this goes. You clearly want something. Just tell me. I'm fine with that. And I'd say, like, I'm actually fine if you want something casual, just let me know.
Yeah.
Some boys would pretend they did and then they'd want more, or some boys would say otherwise. But if a boy literally said to me, like, yeah, do you know what? I'm not looking for anything serious, I'd probably massively respect that and then be like, do you know what? Neither am I. So let's just call this what it is. And like I said, don't fall for potential. Don't romanticize it. See it for what it is and what you've agreed that it will be, and leave it at that. Like, I had a situation and we'd agree to, if we wanted something, then he would either come to mine or I would go to his. We'd have a bit of a catch up as, like, quite platonically, and then, you know, do whatever we wanted to do. And then I'd be like, okay, see you later. Like, see you next time. Like, it was going to be like that because I didn't want anything else. And it honestly was like, it was really healthy because there was so much communication in it. And I think because we did communicate that from the off, he had respect for me, I had respect for him, and it was never going to get messy. And I think that's important because this generation loves to be messy. And I will never understand it. Never.
Do you think that even in that situation though, like, you can still catch feelings? Like, what should you do then if you do start to feel like, you know, we said this was going to be platonic. Like, we said this was going to be just like a fling or like just for what it is. Like, but I'm actually starting to catch feelings. Would you say that, like, straight up and be like, this is where my head is at? Or like, what would you do in that situation?
Transparency is number one. So I think if you do start to catch feelings, there's no harm in saying, listen, I know we agreed it was going to be this. Because we've spent a certain amount of time together, I'm actually starting to like you as a person. Like, I think I could see this going somewhere romantically. If they're like, whoa, no, we agreed it would just be casual, then you'd have to be like, okay, well, I think that it's best if we stop this then, because I'm going to get myself hurt. If they're like, oh yeah, I could see it going the same way, then I think you then have to communicate what you want from a partner, because obviously they haven't been acting like a partner.
It's a different thing.
It's a different relationship. So I think then communicating your boundaries, communicating what you actually want, you know, if you want to go out and be dated, then make that clear. And if they don't want to do that, then they're not the person for you. And like I always, just call it what it is. If they're not doing it, don't fall for the potential. Don't hope for too much, because they, you know, boys don't love to be the most honest, and some girls don't either. So if they say, you know, I can see this going somewhere romantic, and then they don't do the things that you've sort of been asking for, then you just have to put yourself first. And, you know,
I think that's really good advice though, because I think a lot of people would just carry on the situation but try and make it feel like, oh yeah, it's a thing now, like it's a relationship, when actually, like, what you've just said there, basically communicate, like, no, I'm after something different now. I'm not after like just a fling. I am after like a romantic partner, and this is what I'd look for in a romantic partner. And this is my expectations. I think that is like golden advice, because if you set those boundaries, then if they go out and it just continues the way it is, then you know that that's not a relationship, and then you don't have to kind of, you know, want something that isn't going to happen, basically.
Whereas I think a lot of people do romanticize it, and they just really end up getting hurt, or they end up getting themselves in a really toxic or sticky situation. But it's like, you haven't communicated it to them, they haven't communicated properly with you, even though they might see that you are falling for them or something. And it just, the mess.
Absolutely. So I'd love to chat to you a little bit more about sex.
Absolutely.
Very taboo topic. But we're going to break all those taboos today, because we're not afraid to talk about it. Talk 20s is a place where, you know, we want these conversations to be heard. The things that we didn't learn in school, this is where you can get it unfiltered, unbarred. Like, there is literally no holes barred. No. Is that the saying? No holes barred? Don't know. I'm going to say it anyway. But yeah, for you then, like, from your experience talking about sex on the internet, what are the things that have shocked you the most?
The thing that has shocked me the most is people not knowing what's normal and what's not. And I think I've actually learned from doing this job, from talking to people over social media, that there is like normal is a myth.
Yeah.
Like there isn't one thing that is normal during sex. Everyone's bodies are so different. Every person is so different. What people may like is so different.
Yeah.
So there isn't actually anything that is considered normal. There might be things that are like unhealthy or not great, and your body might not like certain things, but there isn't actually something like normal.
Yeah.
And that's what shocks me a lot, is that you're taught that there is one sort of way of sex when you get taught it at school, and it's purely to make a baby, and that's the only sex that everybody has, when it's just not correct.
No.
It's just really not. There's so many different types of sex. There's so many different like ways that you can have sex, and you're just never taught that. And I think just the lack of education around so many different things it shocks me every time. And every time I get a question, I'm just like this is exhausting, because why isn't this something that we're just taught from the off?
Yeah. What kind of questions do you get?
I get a lot of questions from girls about bleeding during sex, about things happening to them during sex, or like in a sexual situation, and they don't know whether it's okay, or they feel sad or upset about it afterwards and they don't know why. I get a lot of questions from guys about erectile dysfunction, or why do I feel this way after sex, and those things as well, I'm like, they're quite easy to answer. So the fact that we're not taught still, I'm like...
Let's talk about it then. So bleeding during sex, why would that happen?
It can happen for so many different reasons. And the first time you're having sex as well, like it can happen, but it doesn't always happen. And that's one of the things I've had sex for the first time, but I haven't bled. Like, does this mean it's going to come at some point? I'm waiting for this like explosion. And I'm like, it might not happen for you, and that's fine. Like, it happened for me, but it happened to me about 2 years after I started having sex. So it can be delayed. It's not always a thing. Like I said, it's always, you're like learning on the job when you're having sex.
Literally.
Like, even, like I've just turned 26, I'm still learning. It can happen, you know, if there's pain that comes with it, then that's not normal. And that's something that you should go and get checked. And I think there's shame in going to get things checked as well. Like, it's fine. Like, if you had a toothache, you go and get it checked. You know, if you had pain when you were eating, or if you heard something and it hurt your ear, like, you'd go and get it checked. So why is it any different? It's still a part of your body. I think there's just a lot of shame, especially with women, that comes with it. So we get all embarrassed, but there isn't any. Like, if something doesn't feel right, you know your own body. If something doesn't feel right, go and get it checked.
Right, erectile dysfunction then, from your perspective, lots of guys asking you about this as well. Like, what do they need to know, and like, how can that be a case?
First of all, it's very common.
Yeah.
So they don't need to be embarrassed about it. They don't need to feel shame about it. I know it's easier said than done to obviously not feel shame, but it is very common. So many guys experience it, and it might just be how your body reacts to certain things. But what I would say to a lot of guys is, don't talk the most. Don't put that pressure on yourself before you have sex with someone, because a lot of the time it can be in your head. If you're talking, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, wow, I'm so sexy. And then it comes to it and you're actually like, whoa, this is the first time I'm having sex with this person. Or even if you might like them and then feel a certain pressure, then it can throw you off because you're in your own head. And it's okay to say, oh, I'm a bit nervous to have sex with you because I like you. Like, again, the honesty, the transparency. Like, if someone said that to me, I'd actually really rate it. I'd be like, that's actually so sweet. And I'm so glad that you were able to be honest with me. Let's just take it slow. And I think a lot of guys think that they have to put this on when they really don't. A lot of things that happen during sex, and for women as well, it can just really be that you're in your own head. And, you know, if it's happening every single time you're having sex, like I said, go and get it checked, go and see a GP. But a lot of things, I do think it's because we're in our own head, or we're just not familiar enough with our own bodies.
Absolutely. I definitely think that the being in your own head thing, and like overthinking situations as well, especially when it's like the first time, like in general, or the first time with someone. Like you can feel really excited about it and like all these kind of emotions, and then you get to it and you're like, oh, like that was really anticlimactic, or that was really like not what I was expecting, or I kind of bigged it up in my head this way. And you can really start to overthink things for sure.
I completely agree. Like when I became single, I was like, yeah, I'm going to go and sleep with loads of people because, well, I thought that's what you're supposed to do after a breakup. And I realized it definitely doesn't help.
Yeah.
But I started to realize like, okay, when you have sex with someone for the first time, especially as a woman, it's not the best experience because they don't know your body. And that's like completely normal. It's nothing that anyone needs to be blamed for. It's just that you don't know my body, I don't know yours. You know, it wasn't the best, but it wasn't the worst. And we move and we get to know each other's bodies, or we just cut it here. You know, it's absolutely fine, and it's actually a lot more relaxed when you think about it like that. You don't know my body, I don't know yours, but if we carry on this, then we can like direct each other, we can get to know what each other likes, and it's a process, like trust the process.
How do you have that conversation then? You've maybe had sex with someone a few times, you know, a couple of times, and it's not gone the best, but you maybe like this person and you see potential like, you know, in other ways, but you want to steer the sex in a certain direction. How do you bring up that conversation?
This is difficult for a lot of people because you have to do it in a respectful way. You know, if you like this person as well, you don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. You don't want to embarrass anyone, which I completely understand. But I think just saying like, oh, I really like when you do this during sex. And I'm not really a fan of when you do that during sex, but like, that's just how I like it. It's nothing to do with like what you're doing or how you're doing it. It's just what I like. That can be like a good conversation when you're not in a bedroom situation. I probably wouldn't do it in a bedroom situation because they might be a bit like, oh.
And then get in their head.
And then get in their head and it just doesn't end well.
No.
I probably wouldn't have that kind of conversation when you're in the middle of having sex either. Like it's just not the time or the place. If you are having sex and you want to say something, I'd probably try and say it in like a kind of, you could say it in like a dirty talk kind of way, or you could just be like, just move there slightly or just move here slightly. And it's just like you're being a bit of a director in the situation, which I think's fine to do. Like as long as you're saying it in a nice way, you're not like, oh, what are you doing? Like don't say it like that. But yeah, just with kindness. And I do think having those conversations outside of sex, and even if you want to try something new as well, a lot of people ask me this, like I want to try this, but I don't have a clue how to bring it up. I say like, what I've done in the past is like, oh, my friend tried this and they really enjoyed it. Like, should we try doing that? Or like, would that be something that you're interested in? And see their response. And because it's not directly about us and I'm talking about someone else, even if, you know, my friend hasn't said anything. I can gauge the reaction. If they're like, oh, you know, I'm not into that, I'd be like, okay, pass. But otherwise, you know, if they seem interested, I'm like, okay, then let's make it happen. Like, or let's do this next time. And it's all about sort of gauging their reaction and then being like, oh, well, I would like to try that. If you don't, then, you know, that's okay. But I've spoken about this before as well. I came out as bisexual in my last relationship and I said, listen, I'm not really prepared to go my life now, because I thought I was going to be with that person, obviously. Good one. But I said, I'm not really prepared to go without ever sleeping with a woman. So like, how are we going to overcome that? And it wasn't really something that he was interested in, but like as time went by, you know, he got used to the idea. But even if you're in a relationship, you know, it's okay to speak about those things, and it should always be met with respect. And if it's not, then, you know, that's up to you to decide what you want to do. But don't feel like you can't bring anything up just because you're in a relationship as well, because I definitely felt that at times, and it's not easy. That's
a difficult topic to approach there with like like wanting to sleep with a woman but being in a relationship. Like, how did you even have that discussion?
Well, I just sat him down and said, listen, I definitely fancy women, and I don't want to go the rest of my life without ever sleeping with one. So you can either get involved or let me do my own thing. And I mean, like I said, he definitely wasn't keen to begin with, but that was just a process, and eventually kind of got used to the idea. And, you know, you can experiment, or if they're okay with it, then they can let you do your own thing, which again, I think is absolutely fine as long as it's open communication.
I think the whole thread of this whole podcast has just been communication.
Yeah, communication, honesty, transparency is, you know, some of these conversations that you might have to have about sex and about relationships are really difficult.
Yeah.
But difficult conversations are like the best ones to have because you can grow and learn from them so much. And I think I've learned that as well since being apart from my partner, my ex-partner, is that they can be really difficult, but that's okay.
Absolutely. I think we also can't have a podcast talking about sex without talking about consent and boundaries.
Absolutely.
So how do you communicate your boundaries and what you don't want to do in the bedroom, and being really clear that, like, you know, about that side of things?
Yeah, I think I've learned that boundaries really start from like the very beginning. Like I said, if you're in a casual situation, you have to set boundaries of what you do and don't want. When you get into a relationship, again, you have to set those separate boundaries. I think people are so scared of this, and it baffles me every time because I'm like, you can have sex with someone, but you don't want to tell them how you feel. Like, how does that work? Like, you're literally stood in front of that person butt naked, but you wouldn't tell them how you feel. Like, that makes no sense to me. It just doesn't correlate. So I think before you start having sex with someone, easier said than done, obviously, if it's like a one-night stand situation. But if you are dating someone and then you sleep with them, again, setting those boundaries and having an open conversation. You can literally say to someone on a date, like I've done this so many times and been like, so what are you into, like sexually? Like, how would you describe yourself sexually? Like, what do you like? What don't you like? And then it gives them an opportunity to say, oh, I like this, I don't like that. And then if they can ask you the same back, and that's your moment, that's your time to shine.
Yeah.
And say, I love this. That's something I'm really not into. And, you know, if this progresses and we do end up having sex, I'd appreciate if that was never a thing. And just setting them from the off. And if you can, doing it before you start to have sex with them. It's also okay if you are having sex with someone and they do something you don't like or something comes up down the line. It's okay to be like, oh, I'm not really into that and I'd prefer if we didn't do that again, or it's triggering, or it makes me feel a certain way, like let's just not. And they do have to respect that. And if someone does it more than once, then you have to say, listen, it's not okay.
Yeah.
And stick up for yourself, as hard as that may be as well. You have to say if something's not okay, and if you're 100%. Not okay with something, or if something's, you know, a bit more intense than you actually thought, and you're like, well, stop, I don't like it.
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, Millie, I've loved chatting to you about sex and relationships and all the do's and don'ts for kind of getting into relationships and how you can be more open and have communication with people. But I'd love to dive into chatting a little bit more about your 20s in general, because you said something whilst we were getting coffee before this podcast, and I was like, I don't even want to hear the story before we in the coffee shop, because I want you to say it on the podcast, and I wanted my reaction to be live. So tell us why you bought a dog on a night out.
Honestly, this story. So I had not long gone through my breakup.
Right.
And I was on a night out, and my cousin had texted me to say that she had got this dog. She's very settled down. She's got a boyfriend, a house.
Yeah.
You know, I was chaotic, single, was renting. Definitely wasn't my time.
Yeah.
But she was like, got this dog, look how cute it is. And I was like, oh my God, I need one. So I was like, send me the link of where you got this dog, or send me the woman's number. And she was like, are you sure? I was like, yeah. But I was drunk on a night out. So I rang this woman and I was like, how many puppies do you have left? I want one.
Yeah.
And she was like, okay, that's fine. We've got 2 left. And I was like, I'll have one. Don't care which one it is. I'm having one. And she was like, send me the deposit. So she was like, send me the deposit of £300. So I was like, okay, did it. The worst hangover ever when I've got to go and buy a crate, a bed, everything. I've got to drive to Leeds to go and pick up this dog. And she's like, okay, the remaining's like £850. And I'm like, wow, that was really an expensive night out. Like, help. And then I literally had this puppy, and I had to go home with him.
But please, obviously, like, puppies are amazing. Like, and don't do this at home, guys. Like, really,
don't do this at home.
Do not do this. Is like we're talking about adulting failures here. Like, this is not fun. But like,
That's
what
really
I want to know is Humphrey well cared for? Like,
he absolutely is. So I kind of had to pull myself together at that point.
Yeah.
And it did actually help.
Yeah.
Like I said, don't do it at home.
Yeah.
But it did actually help because I was in a weird place. I was just chaos all the time, like going out a lot. And when I had him, I was like, okay, it's literally like a baby. Like I have to look after him. I have to train him. Otherwise he's going to be a mess.
Yeah.
So it did sort of get me together. But then because everything changed in my life again, I changed jobs again and all this. And my parents absolutely love him. So I actually gave him to them for like a week and they never actually gave him back.
Gave him back?
Yeah. Because
So
my dad
my
dad loved him so much and my dad was grieving really badly at the time as well. So he was like, please can we just have the dog? He's really helping me.
What Humphrey's been able to do for you guys in love, like that is so cute. Like help you out of a difficult relationship situation
honestly.
and help your dad with grief.
Yeah.
What a beautiful,
do you know
I mean, I'm obsessed with dogs. So.
Yeah, I don't regret getting him.
Yeah.
But it just probably wasn't the right time.
Yeah, big like adulting decision made on a night out, very, very drunk.
Not good. Not good.
Someone needs to take your phone away from you next time.
Honestly, the phone's in the bag at all times now because I'm like, don't buy anything else.
Don't buy any dogs on a night out. I love that. Well, Millie, it has been amazing to have you on the podcast.
Thank
You'll
you.
know from listening to the podcast that we always end the podcast with the same question that we ask every single one of our guests.
Yeah.
And it's if you could look back at 20-year-old Millie and give her just one piece of advice that would see her through her 20s, what would you want to say to her?
Wow. There's so much you learn, like as soon as you enter your 20s. Like I'm 6 years in and I'm like, there's so many lessons I've probably learned. But I think just to know, just to be sure on what your values are and what your morals are, and don't let anyone else, whoever you're surrounding yourself with or who you're in a relationship with, don't let them tarnish that. Like remind yourself of what your values are and don't change for anyone. And I do mean that in friendship, relationships, family members as well. Like really understand yourself, be self-aware and know what your values are, because even now I just think it's so important. And if you're in situations that make you feel uncomfortable, like ask yourself why they make you feel uncomfortable. Is it because they go against your values? And I do think that's like something I just wish I knew or just wish I reminded myself of more. Yeah.
We were talking when we had coffee about like stepping away from situations and friends that like give off energy that you're just like not about, like, and how do you actually like move away from those situations to like spend time with them, especially when you're in your 20s and like, you know, it's hard to make friends in your 20s.
It is. It's really hard.
Sometimes you put up with it. You're like, oh, that person's really like, you know, a bit of a, you know, narcissist or they're really nasty about other people and I'm not really down for that. Like I'd rather like them not be in my life, but then who am I going to hang out with on the weekend? Like that's a really sad realization.
It is. It's a bit daunting as well. You know, a lot of people in their 20s, they move away from their hometown and they might not have friends in that place, but they have friends at home. But honestly, I have like 3 friends at home and I'd rather wait for them to come and see me or for me to go and see them than have fake friends in somewhere that I've moved. I have like a couple of friends where I live, but I'd honestly just rather the pureness of like an actual friendship. And we were talking as well about having friends for specific things, and I just really don't agree with that. I want friendships to be able to cover everything for me. I don't want to use people for certain things, and I think that's something I've learned. Like I'm actually okay with having like
really
friends
small
that,
group of
a
friends.
really small friendship group that I can literally count them on my hand. Like I don't care about it. I'd rather have that and for it to be real and be able to trust them than have all these random toxic friendships that just really aren't serving me.
Absolutely. I think that's amazing advice, and I think an amazing way to end the podcast, because I think a lot of us will be thinking about our sex lives, our relationships, but also who are the friends in our life that, you know, we don't feel like we love spending time with them. And actually it's okay to like take a little step back.
It's okay. It's hard.
Yeah.
But that's okay as well. Like you know, validate your own feelings. You can feel sad about it, but just know that it is probably best for you.
Well, thank you, Millie. I have absolutely loved chatting to you on the podcast about this. I can't wait to see all the content that you put out on social media. Where can people follow you?
You can follow me on TikTok and Instagram, and it's all at Millie G Shields.
Amazing. Well, thanks for listening, guys. We have loved this episode. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, make sure you hit that follow or subscribe button. And you can also watch on YouTube. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe there too.